only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we burn, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
You find your way to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today. Visit online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. David, I'm sure that you've taken care of all your Obamacare coverage on the website and you had no problems whatsoever, and you're a big fan of this, but apparently a lot of people in the country at this point do not like it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I ended up in the wrong studio. I must not be in the right place. This is this Air America we're doing today?
Okay, so maybe you aren't a big fan after all, and maybe it's been a huge headache for you as an individual and for all of WallBuilders, as it has been for the Green family and everybody we know. I'm still trying to figure out how the thing hadn't gotten repealed, as much as people are screaming about how painful it is. But man, you listen to the president, you listen to the administration, they seem to think it's, still popular and the best thing since sliced bread.
Well, it's interesting because the reason it hadn't got repealed, if you want to know why it hadn't got repealed, ask Harry Reid. Well, I can't say that because even if Harry Reid did allow it to come up for a vote, it would pass. Obama would veto it. So that's how the repeal hasn't got passed, because you got to have those three bodies working together, and that's not going to happen. So past that, what is amazing is now...
That's right. So the House did repeal it, right?
The House has repealed it a couple dozen times.
So Republicans have said no. We hear what the American people are saying.
That's right.
They're sick of this. Even the moderate Republicans. I mean, this was, they said no, but none of the Democrats have said, hey, we need to get rid of this thing.
Well, just for the record, the House has passed nearly 200 measures that the Senate has refused to pick up. And they've been small government, reduce spending, get rid of Obamacare. And so, you're not going to get one of the measures they passed in the House that I would like to see passed, called the REINS Act, which says a federal regulation can't become a law unless it's gone through the House and Senate and been voted on and signed by the president. Well, as we know, last year there were about 3,800 new federal laws. Only 127 of them came through Congress. So I would love to see the REINS Act go through, but Harry Reid's not going to do that because that would take the power away from bureaucracy. They're big government people. The president's not going to sign that. So that's why it hasn't been repealed. It's not because the people like it. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we're going to cover on Good News Friday this week is polling that shows that support is still plummeting for this thing. It is still going down. And folks just don't want to talk about it. Democrats are running from it. And when you look at the 7 major reasons in polling that we'll look at on Friday on why this stuff is going down, they all address Americans as saying, we don't like losing our liberty. We don't like losing our freedom. We don't like the fact that we've been lied to. And those are all healthy reasons. I wish they had that before we got this passed. But nonetheless, the support is not there. And so the only thing the White House can do is keep putting a good face on it. And by the way, I saw a really funny piece on The Onion. Onion is a parody kind of a news thing that they make fun of everybody. And it showed all the advisors gathered around Obama for the State of the Union address and said, look, here's what we want to do. Since we want to cover just good news, don't talk about anything going on in America. Talk about anything international. Don't talk about America because that's not good.
Right.
And it's kind of like that with Obamacare. All you can do is try to put a good face on it. And by the way, they said in that little parody that his entire State of the Union address lasted 7 minutes, and a lot of it was a review of a Rolling Stones concert. So there was nothing to talk about that was positive. And so even secular guys on the outside that make fun of both the right and the left are making fun of that. But you have the White
what's
House.
sad though? What's sad to me though, bro, is just there's not a nice way to say it. I mean, the blatant dishonesty.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we get jaded and cynical and say all politicians are liars. But it's not true. There's a lot of honest people in that arena. But man, we are getting nothing but bold-faced lies. I mean, it is beyond anything I've seen before. It's worse than anything I've seen before.
Well, it's the kind of thing where that you're trying to create a legacy, or you're trying to salvage a legacy. And so people 100 years from now, if the Lord is not back, we'll look at presidential addresses and whatever, and he will say how great it was. And 100 years from now, if we're still around, and they'll say, well, look, the president reports that it's really a successful thing. It's part of trying to keep a legacy. Now, the good news is there's enough other news sources out there that people will also check to find out, no, that's not true. Look at the numbers. But that is part of what happens in politics now, is you try to make yourself look good no matter what happens, rather than just stepping up to the plate and saying, you know what, we goofed up on this, let's just trash this and go somewhere else and do something else. That's just
what
not
happened to the good old days when guys like Ronald Reagan would say, hey, history will judge whether or not I did the right thing.
That's right.
I mean, he didn't have to spin it. He just said, hey, here's the decisions I made, and history will judge me.
That's right. And that's just not where we are. But it is interesting that the White House is spinning that. So we thought it'd be really fun to get somebody on who is in D.C., who has to deal with this on a regular basis, who monitors all this stuff, and kind of say, okay, what do you see? How do you see what's going on here?
From Family Research Council, Rob Schwarzwalder will be with us when we return right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. America has a history of great patriots who loved and sacrificed much for their country. One of these was John Witherspoon, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. While president at Princeton, he personally trained many who became important leaders in American government, including James Madison. How could John Witherspoon tell if someone really loved America? He explained, "He is the best friend to American liberty, who is most sincere and active in promoting true and undefiled religion, and who sets himself with the greatest firmness to bear down profanity and immorality of every kind. Whoever is an avowed enemy of God, I hesitate not to call him an enemy to his country." Founding Father John Witherspoon believed that a true American patriot opposed profanity and immorality and promoted true and undefiled religion.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics, WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Our guest today, Rob Schwarzwalder from Family Research Council, Senior Vice President there. Rob, good to have you back, sir.
Oh, it's great to be back with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, man, I'm trying to figure out, whether or not Obamacare is a success or not, because they seem to think it is and keep telling us about all these people that are enrolling and how they've just surged and so successful, but have they really been successful?
Well, it's really amazing that the president the other day went out and suggested that the members of his party who are up for re-election this year run on Obamacare. That's a stunning statement by any measure, financial, participation, coverage. It has been a failure. We know, for example, that since the bill was enacted, the administration and Congress itself have enacted 37 changes to the law. This is an ongoing, rolling disaster. And one of the things that you note is the enrollment figures that they like to tout are extremely questionable. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they reached their goal of 7 million people who enrolled by the end of the open enrollment period, which was just at the end of March. Number one, we were told that there were 46 million Americans without health insurance. What about the other 39 million?
Yeah, how'd we get from 46 down to 7, and that's somehow successful?
That's exactly
We're going to destroy
question.
the whole system so that 7 million get some new plan that they probably didn't want in the first place.
And on top of that, we know that only a relatively small percentage of them, probably less than 25%, didn't already have insurance. In other words, the great majority of the people who signed up for Obamacare are people who already had insurance. Their policies were canceled because apparently their policies didn't meet the standards that the president wanted them to have, and consequently, as a result, you've got them re-enrolling. So that's hardly a surge of enrollment. It's hardly a vindication of this program. The other thing is, too, if you look really at the numbers and you're thinking through what does it mean to not have coverage on a regular basis, overall that 46 million figure includes people who were temporarily unemployed, who worked part-time and then got full-time jobs. In other words, on an ongoing basis, probably only 5 or 6 million Americans did not have consistent, regular health care coverage. Now, there are ways that we should deal with that so that we can make sure they do have access to affordable, quality health care, but not through a big government program, not through taking over, roughly 1/7 of the American economy.
And practically destroying that part of the economy. I mean, it's created mass chaos. I wonder if people at this point attribute it to, are they just blaming it on the website, or do you think the average American is the light bulbs coming on and they're going, maybe government just isn't good at trying to do these things that the marketplace does a much better job of? Do you think that connection is being made yet?
I think it's a great point, and I think it's unavoidable that people are going to scratch their heads for a second and say, this thing ain't working, to paraphrase the president. The bottom line is, as people begin to think about the doctors that they want to have and the health care plans they want to purchase, these are two promises the president made. You can keep your doctor, you can keep your health plan. Neither of these things have turned out to be true. The American people, as you point out, aren't stupid. And if you're somebody who's worked hard, paid taxes, raised a family, and all of a sudden you're told the health insurance that's provided care for your family for the last, say, 15 years is no good, you have to buy something else that's going to drive up the cost of your premiums substantially, that's hardly quality, affordable care that the president promised. It's hardly keeping your own doctor and keeping your own plan.
And then what about the rest of the folks out there? I mean, it seems like I'm having trouble finding positive stories. I mean, everybody has been affected by this in a negative way. I mean, who are the winners, and what is there anything you can point to that's actually working with this massive overhaul?
Well, it incorporated a few Republican ideas. One of them is to allow younger people to stay on their parents' plans for a few years longer. That was a bill that was introduced originally by the new Republican Congress in 1995, the first time in 40 years Republicans had both the House and the Senate. And it was designed to make health care, or to take a lot of these younger people off the uninsured health care rolls, because very few young people really get sick. 90% of health care dollars are spent in the last 6 months of one's life. For whatever series of reasons, we can be thankful that younger people overwhelmingly are healthy. And so by simply allowing them to stay on their parents' plans for a few extra years, that's probably not a bad idea. But in terms of general approach to people getting access to health care, we now have a two-tiered system, the state exchanges and the federal exchanges. We have private insurers, we have corporate insurers. We have people in companies who are losing their health insurance because their companies are simply saying, we cannot afford the new premiums, and so we're throwing you into the federal system. It's hard not to deduce from this, quite frankly, that the plan all along has been to drive people into government-run, single-payer health care, because eventually this is so confusing, it's such a mess, it's such a fiscal disaster, somebody's going to come along and say, look, let's just make it simple. We'll put everybody in government-run health care. And I think for some people that's going to be very appealing. It's one of the reasons we have to keep making the point that you did a moment ago. Government-run health care doesn't work. It's not efficient, it's not affordable, and it's not accessible to millions of people.
Man, you put your finger on my next question, which is a fear that because it's just gotten worse, that now the left will come back, they're never going to admit they're wrong, so they're just going to say, well, we didn't have enough of what we wanted, which is pure socialized medicine, and will the American people be so frustrated with the current system that the left is the one that destroyed, that they're going to say, sure, yeah, that just makes sense. It'll be easier. It'll be smoother. It'll work better. All a facade, of course. Got to take a very quick break. Rob will be right back. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Revisions today often assert that our founding fathers were atheists or agnostics or deists. This charge is not new. In fact, Patrick Henry was even called a deist in his lifetime. Clearly, no one could question his patriotism, but Henry was hurt that they would question his Christianity. Against the charge that he was a deist, Patrick Henry thundered, "Deism, with me, is but another name for vice and depravity. I hear it is said by the deists that I am one of their number, and indeed, that some good people think I am no Christian. This thought gives me much more pain than being called a traitor. Being a Christian is a character which I prize far above all this world has or can boast." Patrick Henry was quick to refute the charge of deism and to declare his open belief as a Christian.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
We're back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Rob Schwarzwalder is with us from Family Research Council. We're talking about the, well, I don't know a nice way to say it, Rob, the abysmal failure of Obamacare, and whether or not people get it, and that they see what's happening, and they are connecting the dots of why it's failing so miserably. As we were going to break, we're talking about this, what happens next if it gets so bad that the president and others from the left are able to sell the American people on complete socialized medicine. What do you think will happen?
Well, I think that this is a classic tactic of the left, first of all. When they say, well, we proposed these things and we admit they didn't work that well, the reason they didn't work is not that they're in themselves ineffective. It's because, hey, we didn't spend enough money and have enough control from Washington. So let's put more into it. We've seen that in federal education aid. We've seen that in all kinds of spheres of health care. We've seen that in a variety of other areas where when Washington comes in and says, I'm here to help you, basically what they're saying is, I'm going to become the senior partner, and I'm going to force you to accept something that I'm telling you is good for you, so be quiet and eat your spinach. The American people are a free people. They should not be treated that way by the government that ostensibly represents them. In terms of the kind of thing that I think we're looking for, though, in very practical terms, if the left is successful in continuing Obamacare into the next administration, in other words, if Republicans are unsuccessful in overturning it, it's hard not to think that the media particularly are going to keep pushing, putting a rosy face on this until the next Democratic administration where they say, you know, it's been such a success, but we admit there have been problems. We can even do it better. Let's make it a federal program entirely. That's their tactic. We've seen that time and again. That's one of the reasons why the left is so resistant to reforming our welfare system, because they realize even though it doesn't work, if we truly reform it, we're going to have a less power in the hands of those who want to continue to create dependency.
And expose them, expose that their policies were a failure and that there is a better way.
Exactly. By virtue of true reform, they have to admit that they've done something wrong and that their policies don't work. And that's something that they just can't do.
And two more points. One, and these two it seems like we're going to have to do to keep them from being able to move to total socialized medicine. One is to point out not only how this has failed, but frankly how I'm not trying to be cliche here, how unconstitutional the things that have been done are. In other words, I mean, you mentioned 37 significant changes made. Well, well over half of those were completely unconstitutional, unilateral, by fiat, by the president, no congressional, approval type things. So that's been a big part of Obamacare. So I want you to address that, and then also, what are the positive alternatives? How important is it for those of us that come from more of a constitutional conservative perspective to put solutions on the table and articulate them well?
Both of those are great points. First, to the constitutional point, when Nancy Pelosi, the former Democratic Speaker of the House who's still in Congress, was asked by a reporter, what's the constitutional basis of Obamacare? She got angry, and she said, are you serious? This is something that I think is very telling. Thomas Jefferson warned that unless we have a strict interpretation of the original and clear meaning of the Constitution would become what he called a thing of wax in the hands of an activist judiciary. We've seen that over and over again. We've seen it also true in the Obama administration. They will stretch any constitutional limit they can. And they do it on this pretext, interestingly, and that is because it's not specifically forbidden in the Constitution, it should be allowed. That is a radical departure from the philosophy and the explicit teaching of America's founders, which was things that are not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution belong to the states, and they belong to the individual people. The 10th Amendment, the 9th Amendment, these are amendments that guarantee you can't overstep, or at least they're supposed to guarantee, the government cannot overstep its constitutional limits. And as a result, we have what is in essence an unconstitutional effort on the part of the Obama administration to nationalize, federalize, and at least partially socialize American medicine. And ultimately, I think that is their goal. With respect to something that you said earlier, though, and I think it's important to realize this, as we think about alternatives to what's going forward, 2 points. Number one, Republicans have put forward at least 4 major comprehensive reform plans. These are conservative, market-oriented reform plans. Now, President Obama might not like what's in them. He might not think that they're good plans. Frankly, I haven't studied any of them too closely. One of them I have a bit, but I can't speak for the validity of each one of them. I can say, though, that the president is dead wrong when he says conservatives have not offered alternatives. We have too. 20 years ago, I had the privilege of working for a man who's still in the United States Senate, Dan Coates. In 1993-94, he offered comprehensive health care reform. So you can't say that this is not done. With respect to the constitutionality, I would argue we have to be very careful that we don't, in essence, kind of like the little kid in the back of the class who raises his hand and said, me too, me too. Republicans and conservatives, more importantly, constitutional conservatives, should care deeply about whether or not the federal government should play an active role in reforming a comprehensive statewide voluntary health care system, a system of health insurance. The overwhelming majority of Americans get their health insurance through the companies for which they work, and those companies provide it to them not under legal obligation, but as a benefit. These are the kinds of things we have to look for, in my view, at the state level particularly, to see what can be done to enhance and expand access at the state level. The one-size-fits-all, Washington knows best solution doesn't work. We've seen that for decades, from the Great Society clear back to the New Deal. We're deluding ourselves if we think somehow we can wave a magic wand and find something in the Constitution that isn't there and advance an approach to governance that the founders never envisioned.
Rob, I can't remember the last time I was that silent for that long on this program, but that was so articulate and so succinct, and you just laid it out. I mean, that, not only the problems itself, how important it is, and the approach and the focus that we should have, but setting the record straight that conservatives have not been silent on this issue. They have been engaged. They have put forth market-based proposals, and then the solutions themselves and the things that we need to do. I'm so glad you're in this fight, man. I'm so thankful that FRC has you, and we'd love to get you back to talk more about it, and specifically to get to focusing in on some of those solutions, because obviously the media plays a role in this, and you rarely hear about the solutions that are being proposed and the alternatives. So we love the opportunity to get that out to our folks. We appreciate your time and coming on today, Rob. The website frc.org, right? Is that where we need to send folks?
That's the website, and please say hello to David for me. And you guys are just doing such great work. It's a pleasure to partner with you.
We'll do it, man. Thanks for coming on today. Back in a moment with David Barton. Red, White, Blue, and Green is a new reality show following the Green family around the nation, rediscovering the American principles that made us the most successful nation in the history of the world. You can be a part of launching this new reality series by visiting rickgreen.com and clicking on the Red, White, Blue, and Green tab. Here's a sneak peek from the pilot episode. Rick Green coming to you live from the Lone Star State of Texas, a beacon of hope and freedom to liberty lovers around the world. Today I'm thinking about why do we do what we do? Because everywhere we go as a family, when we're traveling and speaking, someone comes up to us and asks, where's the hope? Is it over for America? They genuinely feel like the stars and stripes are fading. I felt that. But when I look at my family, whether it's my son Trey and his drive to exceed expectations, or Reagan and his love for serving and teaching other people, Cameron and her determination to outperform her brothers in everything she does, or my little stage hound Rhett and his boundless enthusiasm. Through their eyes, I see a vibrant nation. When my children stand in the birthplace of the Constitution, or on battlefields where patriots gave their lives, I can see in them a rekindled flame of the American spirit. The future of my children's country is bright because it's built on the foundation of an incredible providential history, a history of patriots and pastors, entrepreneurs and freedom fighters, mothers, fathers, families like yours and mine, who chose to live like their nation depended on it. And it still does. So when people ask us, where is the hope? We tell them, it's in you. Each of us, every individual, every family, has a duty to fight for freedom and add our voice, our color, to the American dream. For our family, it's red, white, and blue, and a little bit of green. To learn more about Red, White, Blue, and Green, visit rickgreen.com.
Let the torch of freedom
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. And David, I know we can see through all of these, smoke and mirrors and people trying to make Obamacare look better than it is. But do you think the majority of the American people, the polling says they don't like it, but do they get the fact that they're being lied to?
Well, I think so, and I think even the Democrats get that, because I was just told this week in D.C. of a town hall meeting that happened with 3 Democrat congressmen in that town hall meeting. And this is their town hall with folks that elected them, and they jumped them about Obamacare. And they're all 3 on stage, and they're being asked about it, and they were all squirming. And finally, one of the congressmen said, I voted against it. So you asked the other two why they did what they did. And, even the Dems are running from this thing. They did not like their own town hall meetings. So I think it's pretty evident, but there's just nothing you can do about it because, I mean, we put a guy in office. This was his signature thing. Don't expect him to turn over his signature piece. And Harry Reid staked his reputation on it as well. So it's just the way it is. You know, if we get somebody back in next time that can repeal this, if we get enough of the Senate, that'd be great. But I like what Rob said. He said it's a classic tactic of the left that when it doesn't work, they just say it wasn't because we didn't do enough of it. You know, it didn't work, so we need more of it. It'll work if we do more of it. The reason it didn't work is we didn't have enough. So they can't ever admit their policies won't fail. They just want more of the policies, and that'll be the difference. It's kind of where we are with Common Core right now. They keep talking about Common Core is internationally normed. Well, internationally normed to what? Oh, by the way, I did find out that the math standards they're putting out, they were introduced by Russia 30 years ago as a new approach to trigonometry. Russia tried it. It was a complete abysmal failure. They threw it out, and so now we picked it up and said, we're going to make it work. It didn't work for anybody else. That's internationally normed. We've got stuff that was internationally normed by Russia, but it didn't work for them. So, I mean, terms like that, they get thrown out and phrases like that. That is crazy stuff that they use. But that's just their mentality, is they will not face facts or admit defeat or admit failure. But the American people do, and they see it, and they see what's going on.
They do, and if we'll take action and we'll keep doing our part, we can get this thing turned around. It's not going to happen overnight, though. It's going to take time. So stay the course, folks. Thanks for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.